fond farewell speech at the end of the year. But as of Tuesday, this becomes somebody else's. We'll go first. On Tuesday, do any directors expect to be absent? On Tuesday.
Does that mean we're not going to be discussing Unit 9, 10, 11?
On Tuesday, I will meet with the president and the directors. I'll also try to meet, if that person's already determined, with your web designer. Do you know who your web designer is? If you have a chance to assign this position, thank you, or start to talk to the candidates by Tuesday, that would be great. Has your period completed a draft of the elevator pitch?
No.
Do you have a calendar? Do you have the marketing plan outline?
Yeah.
Which part?
Like questions in the general with this.
Is that on one paper?
That's on the email, yeah.
Can you get that on one paper by Tuesday, please?
Yeah.
Let's also secure the elevator pitch.
On Tuesday, we'll start working from those drafts as a class, while I talk more with the board of directors, and the president will mostly be dedicated entirely to meetings that day. Are there any questions about this? Thank you very much. I have some predictions for you. Because the AP Environmental exam, like Law and Order, is inspired by true events, ripped from the headlines. This is the part where most of my students like to write stuff down. The College Board will be influenced or inspired by true events, environmental topics, and environmental catastrophes, and environmental policy issues, and so on, that are recent. You know, like Law and Order, they'll change the names, they'll add some drama, but like Law and Order, you'll notice it's kind of familiar if you're up with current events. First of all, if you have a chance, you might want to Google some sort of 2013 environmental topics, environmental catastrophes, biggest environmental stories, worst environmental accidents, that kind of thing. They're not going to ask you trivia about the news, but it's kind of cool to see the content organized in a news story that you can skim in 5 seconds. Because a lot of those are going to show up on the AP test, yes?
And our Smart Advanced Guide has a bunch of those crazy environmental accidents and whatnot. Are there more than those?
Yes, there are others.
More noteworthy ones?
Those are the most famous ones.
Okay.
Would they come up with like the Keystone Pipeline or that stuff?
That's on my short list, yes. So they're not going to ask you about the Keystone Pipeline, but they might ask you a question like, remote petroleum extraction areas present challenges to processing. Please describe 2 issues you might, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, they're talking about the Keystone. Thank you. I know, Julie Bennett. They might say, I know, you might do better by saying, oh, I know that the Keystone has this controversy about where they're going to route it, and how there's political things about encouraging dirty whatever. Yeah. So, after you've Googled those things, if you find a website that has useful review of environmental content from 2013, you might want to post that to the Facebook group for the class, the YAPES 2013-14 group. I'm sorry that you might get a couple of postings if other students take my advice. I have told all my periods to do this. Here are some topics that I think are potential concepts. Farmed salmon and GMOs. Incineration. Preventing runoff. E-waste. Alternative energy. What we call the heavyweight crudes, like oil sand and oil shale and tar sand and tar shale and all that stuff. And possibly the Keystone Pipeline / transportation of crude. You might see something about fracking this year. And some of the topics that have been in the pipeline about fracking are secrecy and community approval, sort of right to know about the chemicals, risk potential maybe. Methane leaking has been in the news with fracking.
In the water supply?
No, into the atmosphere. And the deep well injection of fracking waste fluid, which may be the biggest question mark about groundwater. I think.
The seismic activity thing?
What?
The seismic activity?
Can't prove it.
I gotta say that the seismic thing is probably minor. Fracking, as far as we know, does not cause seismic activity. The fracking itself is really shallow relative to tectonic rifts. The disposal of the waste fluid seems to be associated with very small earthquakes. But I think we're a little bit premature. That's kind of fringe science right now. I think that carbon economics, what we call carbonomics, might be getting close here. I think one of these days, they're going to have a question for you about carbonomics. Remember, carbon tax, carbon markets, allowable trade, allowable emission trading. There's probably going to be some question about economics the next time they ask about carbon and global climate. Also, if they do ask about global climate, my hunch is they're going to ask about extreme weather events. We have had an era of extreme weather events. I put that on their list for 2012, and then in 2013, we had even more extreme weather events. The extreme weather thing is getting really, really, really serious. A lot they could ask about that. I think Fukushima is an interesting topic. It's been in the news a lot. There's a lot of conspiracy theory stuff. There's a lot of panic. And interestingly, as far as I can tell, the science has been really clear that Fukushima represents no risk to you. It's a perfect example of the dosage response curve. That if you live right next to Fukushima, you're dead meat. And if you eat rockfish from right next to Fukushima, you're an idiot. And if you live in Santa Barbara, you should worry more about sun tanning than you should about Fukushima. Fukushima was a giant nuclear disaster that happened in Japan a couple years ago.
Due to the
Earthquake, tsunami. Also, it would seem obvious that they might want to talk about droughts, water conservation, water usage. One issue that I started adding to the class this year is the term impoundment, where you contain surface water pollution in impoundment dams or impoundment ponds. Those have been on the news a lot, actually. There was a fire in an impoundment pond in Asia. In Quebec, they're having to use these really extreme measures to scare away birds from impoundment ponds. In West Virginia or something, they had that impoundment pond that ruptured and poured coal waste chemicals into surface waters. I think impoundment is a good topic for them to put on there. As a matter of fact, there was even a whole city buried by a tidal wave of impoundment water from mountaintop removal in Appalachia like just over a year ago. It's like a small town up a river, and the dam just broke, and it was just like this tidal wave of mud, and like literally like houses under mud. Yeah.
So this impoundment is like all
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be really toxic per se. Impoundment just means the containment of water on the surface in temporary storage. You hope that it will concentrate there. Yeah, it's usually from extractive stuff. It's really large-scale contamination of water. So you're talking like open pit mines, strip mines, mountaintop removal, the ashes from coal burning sludge. I mean the sludge from coal burning ashes. Something else that I think is likely to end up on there this year would be something about the coal mining process. You know, coal is always a touchy subject for the environmental world. But coal has had like some catastrophic news in the last couple of months. It's amazing that the coal political power has grown, while the market share of the coal industry has almost disappeared. Coal is dying fast and growing in political power. They've had some really bummer news. Coal ash, coal pollution, obviously. The carbon thing isn't helping.
What's replacing it?
Natural gas is on the rise in this country. Fast. Really fast. Alternative energy might get its day. I don't know. Not much. Deep water petroleum extraction. The Kuluk in Alaska had a big accident. And the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico had an accident. And remember, they're not going to ask you trivia. You don't need to look these up to memorize content. They're just going to ask you a question that might seem familiar if you read the news about the story, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's most likely going to be like those questions with the article, and they say about like what happened, and we just have to explain scientifically what happened.
It could be a DBQ, but it could also be just one of their synthesis evaluation questions.
Okay.
Like, they're going to ask you about stuff you learned in this class no matter what. But if you read about how it came up in Alaska, that might help you keep it organized in your brain for when they ask you about it in a fictional setting. Next, you have Smarty Pants Guide, some notes, your notes about where you went wrong on old exams. You have your handouts that I've given you about experimental design, about chemistry, about law. You have that CD of PowerPoints, and you have all those reading packets and what you might find on the internet. I have to stress that each of these will give you a few free points. Like experimental design, if I ask you one of those questions, you got 3 to 5 easy. Oh, thanks, Claire. You shouldn't have.
No, sorry. Not for you.
Oh, wait, you didn't.
You want one next time, maybe?
What is that? Green? Is it as me or is that green? I'm trying to air Quality control. Claire, wait, hold on a second, I'll tell you. Yes, I did. All right, I'm down. That's good. Where's this from? What is it?
Fresh Market.
Cool, bro.
Okay. See you later, everyone.
Okay, bye, then. Experimental design is easy money. Chemistry is easy money. Law is easy money. And one of the PowerPoints I gave you is surprisingly critical. The common mistakes. We all make the same mistakes over and over again. It's perfectly natural. But just so you know, the PowerPoint of common mistakes is like hugely helpful, or has been hugely helpful to students so far. Now let's talk about test day. I got some news for you from Hazel.
Yay.
You should know where you're sitting. Does anybody not know their seat number in their room? Girls, gym? No. The library computer lab, when you walk in on the right, room, desk number 3. Millington Library, desk 13. Cutler Girls Gym, desk 23.
Jack Keo.
Anybody else? Keo Girls Gym, desk 68.
Oh.
Felice Library, desk 24. Anybody else? Marissa Girls Gym, desk 58. Quiet, please. This is Jose. Cutler, did you not go see Hazel the last time at lunch?
Yeah, I did. Oh my God, what?
Apparently you have to go again, different answer sheet.
Wait, what? She said she found it.
You have to transpose it to a large print answer sheet?
What?
I don't know. Do you have bad eyesight or something?
What?
Do you have bad eyesight? Bubbling, anxiety? I don't know, dude. Like, large answer sheet.
That's halfway forward.
For the large answer sheet?
No, I'm supposed to be in a different room.
Fuck, man. I don't know. Can you please talk to her about it at lunch today? I'm sorry to ruin your lunch. Maybe that's why she called again today. She needs to see you. I don't know the details. I know it's a hassle. Being right won't change the fact that if you don't, it's probably worse. Anybody else know their room number? Like, she is crazy, and it's still important that you go see her. Next. If you haven't done your pre-enrollment, you'll lose your break and you'll have to stay late. You go to the building by 7:45. They close the doors by 7:50 because it takes about 10 minutes to get everybody seated in the right spot, to get all the backpacks put away, to read the announcements about water bottles and backpacks. And they have to start at 8 because it's a national exam. It's all timed at the same time nationally.
Is that, so does the East Coast do those at 11?
They're by time zones. They have snacks provided for you So they emphasize that you should use the bathroom before you go because they have to have proctors escort you to and from the bathroom. Any more? Are there others? Remember, if this isn't valuable for you, I don't mind. Just be quiet, please, so I can finish. I know it's funny, though, the proctology thing, yes. If you need to use the bathroom right after the multiple choice, there's going to be 70 other kids that have to go. So you might be waiting until they all get back before you get your chance. I think that's a big concern. Security things are changing. I don't know if you guys are aware that I am the organizer for all the SAT testing on campus. And the College Board has been embarrassed and embarrassed and embarrassed and embarrassed again. They had the first national lawsuit about cheating last year. There's been like a lot of pressure on them with the whole cell phone and technology, kids getting better at cheating thing. So they keep cracking down. This year, all testers had to sign a legal affidavit that says they understand it's a duty for them to destroy your test. For example, if they see any evidence that you had a cell phone within the limits of the testing environment, including during break and after testing. So you finish your test, you go grab your purse, you take out your cell phone, and you just got your test voided. Like, nobody wants to be a jerk about this. I know everybody who's testing you, they're all good people. They don't hate students. You could push them, you know, maybe they won't void your test, but I would strongly recommend that you not put them in that position, because even if they end up being nice to you, they're going to hate you. Like, seriously, no cell phones in the room. You can probably get away with it, and they'll probably be cool about it if they catch you, but you've done something uncool to them. So I would recommend no cell phones in the room at all. I mean, what's the big deal? You can't use it anyway. It's not going to help you anyway. It's going to lay you down and you drop it or lose it or something and save your battery. Just leave it in your car. You must have your own sharpened pencils, blue-black ink, and I recommend, if you can get your hands on it, these sweet-ass erasers, which leave no smudges on the answer sheet and could save your life. Pentel Polymer. High polymer. There are no pencil sharpeners in the girls' gym, and I believe there's only 2 in the library. They recommend that you bring multiple sharpened pencils. You'll not be allowed to have your backpacks or purses in the testing area. If you bring snacks, they'll have to stay with your bags at the door. If you bring water bottles, check this out. They must be perfectly clear with no labels. So these, not allowed. These, only if you take the label off. William Belfiore's, not allowed because of its color.
Why?
Aside from this pointless conversation, are we clear about the fact?
Why is it, do you know?
So like that silver.
They've warned me to remind you that until they've collected all the papers, they still count it as testing time. So even if the time is up, and even if they take your test away and Kyla's test away, if they still haven't taken Andrew's test away and she and I speak to each other, they have to treat that as cheating. Aside from all the logic of all this, I just wanted to be really clear, because I know that the College Board is really cracking down on the security thing. It is, by the way, the main threat to you getting credit for AP coursework. The colleges don't want to accept these because it's so easy to fake it, to cheat, and they reflect so strongly on demographic disparities. Like, if it were a more serious and legitimate exam, more colleges would accept them. So I got to warn you that the College Board is trying really hard to stay in business. They have to crack down on security thing. You wouldn't believe the crap we have to do for the SATs now. Are there any questions about Hazel's death threats on 2 pages of email?
I feel like
Next.
you're not joking at all.
On, for you studying, the single most important thing you need to know about getting ready, this is all data driven, it's not an opinion, is that the number one variable which affects performance on exams is how well you sleep the night before. Like cramming dry cleaning into a crowded closet, there's a point where you just can't add any more without damaging the rest. A lot of students feel like, crap, I still haven't studied this paper and I've got an hour left, I should just go for it. But like cramming your dry cleaning into a crowded closet, you start to make wrinkles in the rest. You start to ruin the rest. It's better to give up studying than to cram. You increase your error rate and you lower your overall content acquisition, your recall ability when you cram. Sleep is really critical for the brain secretary to organize the input. Across the board, data-driven, this has been tested. You show me the research, I'll give you a burrito. If you can contradict me, it's settled. I got 35 witnesses. If you don't get a good night's sleep, your performance goes down on testing. What?
Like what constitutes cramming? Like when the day before?
You want to sleep roughly half an hour to an hour earlier than usual. So if you sleep at midnight, I want you to get an extra 60 minutes of sleep. And my recommendation is finish off your studying with a snack you like. Apparently, if you go to sleep in a good mood, you have better recall. There's other ways to go to sleep in a good mood, I'm sure you all know. Yes?
What time does the test start? Do you know?
I just talked about that, didn't I?
I think I last time.
Sorry, dude. I can't keep catching you up with all the shit.
I was just saying,
Everybody else heard. Talk about it. Next! Dude, do you realize how annoying it is?
I mean, I was asking, I was following.
How many of you heard what time the test starts on Monday?
Well, they just start it later if they want us to get more sleep.
How many of you would like to hear my opinion on why they don't start it later? Shut up.
It's okay if you don't. Carry on.
Thanks. On the morning of the test, listen carefully, you want to wake up 30 minutes earlier than usual. Sorry. And in those extra 30 minutes, you want to have your usual caffeine volume, no more and no less. It's a bad day to get the shakes. You probably would do better if you ate fruit, sugar on the way into the test. And BT dubs, any way that you can do it, you want to break a sweat right before you walk in the door. So riding a bike, skateboard, jumping jacks, I don't want to have a conversation about this. But apparently your brain does better in the cool down period after light physical activity. You want to break a sweat.
Jesus.
The way that this was clarified in the research paper was, if you're wiping the sweat off your brow and have 15 minutes of cool off before you pick up the pencil, your scoring goes up the most. You'll want to dress comfortably. You don't want to be struggling with your hoochie pants to wrestle the wedgie from hell on the day of the test. And Andrew, I'm tired of telling you about the hoochie pants, bro. Give it up. You'll want to make an educated guess, but just so you know, blind guessing is pointless. If there are 5 questions and you only have 1 minute, just read the shortest one. Don't randomly bubble 5. Because you raise your chances by making an educated guess.
Okay, but like, yeah, guessing doesn't hurt you.
Yeah, there's no more guess penalty. So technically, if it was more than 5, your odds would probably go up by like this. Do not waste time on difficult questions. Those of you who tried it on the final, I've gotten a lot of feedback from my students. They're like, wow, I tried that too. You were totally right. If it's too difficult to answer it right away, come back. If it's too difficult to answer it right away, come back. For one thing, something might remind you of the answer later. For another thing, you want to pick the low-hanging fruit. If there's a rainstorm coming in, you don't set up the ladder to pick the highest peach at the top of the tree. You run through the orchard grabbing all the low-hanging peaches. Remember, you have a limited amount of time, and when you struggle, your success rate afterward declines across the board. You want to leave the hard ones for the end, for a number of reasons. You can always double check your answers, but listen carefully. Don't second guess your answers. If you meant to bubble C, double check that you actually bubbled C. But if you had decided that number 1 was C, don't change your answer. Most corrections erase an accurate one and replace it with a wrong one. FYI, second guessing is usually 2 to 1 in the wrong direction. You'll have 4 free response questions. Calculation-based, document-based, and synthesis evaluation. Listen carefully to this. Each of those 4 has 10 points possible and usually 4 or 5 letters. A, B, C, D, sometimes E, rarely F.
What were they again?
Those 4 questions will be broken up, each of them, into separate letters. Those letters are usually separate. So for example, the calculation-based will have A, B, maybe C relative to the calculations, but D, E, maybe C will be separate from the math. They're just questions about content. So if you can't do the math, read down. You might be able to get D and E anyway. The DBQ, even if the DBQ, you don't want to read the whole thing, you can still answer D and E separately. If something confuses you, skip the letter, I guess, but don't skip the whole free response question. Like the multiple choice, answer the easy ones first. And here's the order. This is very important. The first thing you do, everybody in the room, is the calculation part of the data set question. Then all the synthesis and evaluation parts. So the end of the calculation-based question, the 2 plain free response questions, and the synthesis evaluation part of the DBQ. The last ones you want to answer are the questions that require reading the document. The very last thing you need to do is read the document and then answer A, B, C about the document. If you were going to skip, you took all the easy points first and you left the most minutes for the least points to the end. Remember to identify the action words. Make sure you know what you're doing and think about the question for a minute. Then outline. Spend as little time as possible writing. All you need is 10 sentences to get 10 points. You should look at the question very carefully and figure out which are the 10 points possible, and for each of them provide 1 sentence. They'll say, identify 1 blah, 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 and explain 2 blah, blah, blah. That's 3 sentences. Identify and explain will usually be in bold. Remember, just 1 sentence per point. Every single question on every single AP test has been answered by all 5 of the College Board approved textbooks. It might have just been one sentence, so maybe you missed it. But if you have a nagging feeling that you saw it in your book, that's probably the answer. You shouldn't be making stuff up. They don't ask anything that isn't somewhere in your book. We didn't excavate every sentence out of that book. But just so you know, you shouldn't be generating stuff from the ether. It was all in your book. Remember that length does not equal point. The biggest waste that students make on a free response question is not enough time reading, not enough time outlining, and too much time writing. Always include your units in any written or calculation question. Always show your work for all data sets. No abbreviations. Even if they know what the FBI is, you have to say Federal Bureau of Investigation. No abbreviations. When they ask you about cost and benefit, be very clear that you know what type of cost and benefit they're asking you. If they say economic, don't talk ecological. And if it's a cost-benefit question, you always have a because in your sentence. Water pollution is bad for the tourist industry, comma, because kelp draws scuba divers from all over the world. Be very careful when they ask for multiple options that you give different ones. You might remember that example about how a more efficient shower head and a more efficient faucet are both parts of one option, more efficient water fixtures. So if you want to know how to save water, you do more efficient shower heads and change your irrigation schedule. Behavior and the thing that you buy, those are always going to be different. If you say 2 different behaviors, like don't leave the faucet running when you brush your teeth and don't leave the faucet running when you wash your hands, like you just gave 2 behavioral changes, that's 1 bullet. Your calculations are always reasonable, especially if they are for dollar values. And just so you know, they will trick you once in the data set. Usually in the units or in the decimal places on the axes of graphs, charts, tables. So be very, very careful with the trick question that's in almost every single data-based question. If they ask you in the synthesis evaluation about what's good and what's bad about something, do not give them the greenest answer. Give them your strongest answer. If they ask you for the 2 possible positions on pesticides, remember there's no scientific evidence about pesticide being bad for consumers, but there's plenty of benefit for consumers from pesticides. Like increase the yields through economies of scale. That's easy. So don't go out of your way to treat this like an interview for Greenpeace. Remember to just stick to the strongest data-driven positions, even if they're not part of the traditional environmentalist platform. Think about the poor losers that are going to be grading your exam. They get paid a teeny stipend to spend about a week in something like University of South Carolina or some place that's really hot and crappy. They spend a week in July at like 1,000,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity's right around underwater. They have to stay in a crappy hotel or a dorm room. They eat dorm food.
How are you doing that?
Because we're teachers, dude. We're so broke.
Are you better?
No. They work under fluorescent lighting in little lab rooms. They sit in these sort of chairs, which you think are horrible for you. Imagine when you get old and crappy like me, how uncomfortable those chairs are. And they grade over and over and over again the same question, 8 hours a day, fluorescent lighting, for 5 days in a row. Imagine by coincidence that you are the second to last essay question after a 5-day suffer fest. You think they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt? You think they're going to struggle to read your writing? You want to write it clearly, neatly, and just so you know, they might only be reading B. So if you want them to go somewhere else, they won't find the rest of B. You got to tell them. I continued after question C. Put a little arrow. Editorial markup is allowed. Arrows, cross out, circle, underline, bar through it. All those things are fine. Standard arrow circle boxes, perfectly good. But they're not going to read the whole thing to look for you. If you're totally bored, write them a little note. Hope you're having a good time. Santa Barbara was really nice today. Thank you for grading my test. Appreciate it. Can't hurt, might help. If you got time to waste, make them a drawing. Channing Peake said, I don't know how to do this, so here's a picture of a unicorn I drew. Please enjoy. And he drew a unicorn.
It says majestic.
It says majestic, that's right. Yes?
This is like a really specific question, but when I was reading one of our free response questions, it was talking about ozone, and you said never to connect ozone and greenhouse gases, but it said that an acceptable negative human health impact of ozone would be the statement that ozone is a greenhouse gas or contributor to climate change or global warming. And that's
All those are correct, but that's not ozone depletion connected to climate change. That the gas ozone is a global warming gas. It was one of our list of 5 ozone greenhouse gases. Right, but these are different layers. So it's not that the ozone hole has anything to do with climate change. It's that there are some of the same ingredients in both. CFCs are also greenhouse gases and ozone depleters. So they have similar ingredients. I can see why you'd be confused. But the concept of depletion has nothing to do with the concept of global warming. But I'd like to continue. If something sounds confusing and you have trouble saying it, you can use a diagram. Like if it's tough to explain how a nuclear power plant works, you can say the water goes from A to B and then heats up and goes to C where it spins D. And if your diagram is labeled, for many of you it's easier to draw it with labels than it is to write it, that's fine. Just so you know, vocabulary is never enough for an answer. If they say identify something, and you say it's biological oxygen demand, you didn't identify it, you just named it. So you never use just a vocab term. Second of all, if you forget the vocab term, there's no penalty if you can describe it. So you can say the part of the thing where blah, blah, blah happens. At some point you get too vague. The thing with the other thing that does that other thing with the thing involved for the thing problem. Like that could be too vague. But as long as you can describe it, you don't need to know the word. Don't waste time on the vocab. It's not a vocab test, it's a concept test. What?
I was going to say, like, if you use the wrong word, then, like, you probably get through into, like, using it in the right context.
There's no point, there's no markdown for the wrong information. There's no credit for contradictory. So if you say both, you don't get credit for either. If you call it the wrong thing and describe it correctly, the concept was right, they don't ding you for the term.
Oh, but you can't, like, cover all your bases and say, like, 2 different things that are totally...
That's right. If you contradict yourself, you've just covered your bases. They give you no points. Remember, no abbreviations, no fluff. You don't restate the question. You don't give opinion where they're not asking. Remember not to think of this as an expository essay. You don't need development. You don't need the hamburger sandwich concept. You don't need supporting details. You don't need any of that crap. It's an interrogation. The questions are really explicit about what they need you to say, and just say that. A noun, a verb, a subject, an object, you should be good to go if it's in a full sentence. Remember, write down the things you know best first, because if they ask you to list a bunch, they might stop at number 2 or at number 3, even if you said the right thing at number 4. Outline form, list, Bullets, not acceptable. Must be full sentences in English. Show your work for calculations. Don't forget to use the units. Remember to be confident when you're taking the test. I got to remind you that nationally, 30% of students don't finish the book. Half of students don't have a review session or receive review materials. Almost no students have a supporting film series. I think we might be one of the only classes nationwide that does. We're one of the only classes nationwide that has a reader to parallel the content. Just so you know, you've got a lot of legs up on the competition. And just so you know, you need about a 50 to 60% overall at the end to pass the test. You won't know about 10% of the multiple choice. That's a promise. Don't worry. Neither does anybody else. There's always going to be some regional, trivial thing that you don't know. About 10% of the multiple choice, don't worry about it. If you can nail the other 90, you got 5. No big deal. So don't freak out if you don't know about 10%. On the essay, 1 or 2, maybe 3 letters, you won't be able to answer it all. That's okay. Just nail the rest. One of the essay questions will seem really weird, remote, difficult. Don't worry about it. Just nail the rest. You have so many legs up on the competition. As long as you stay calm and you don't have a panic attack, please, we get about 3 a year. It's a distraction for everybody else. No need for panic. Just stay calm. Skip the hard stuff. Focus on the easy stuff. There's enough easy points that most of you will pass just on those. Then you got plenty of time for the parts where you need to struggle. Question, Greg?
Yeah, is it like for your test where if we write down a bunch of ideas that we know could be possibly right, we should not do that? Like write down a bunch of ideas and the off chance that 3 out of 4 were right.
Right. Yes.
For abbreviations, I feel like say what it is and then for parentheses.
That's fine, then you introduce it for later, yes. What else?
If you do like outline in the space provided and then you write A, they only start grading at A, right? They don't, like, so if you like outline in the space, so like.
That's probably true, yeah.
So you,
If I were you, I'd put it someplace else. What else?
Do you put rice in your burritos?
These are from over here. Yeah. And they. We got about a minute and a half.
I have some confetti. You want it?
Probably Tuesday.
So is this just like a really long, formal version of your test?
Yeah.
4 times, right?
4 times. 104. Yeah.
Would you get them on the